Hello, everybody, and welcome back to I'm a Fan of That, the show where we talk about the wonderfully complicated worlds of fandom through the objects that we love. I am your pop anthropologist, Vivian Asimos, and not like always, I am actually alone. I am not joined by the wonderful, the award-nominated pop culture writer, Holly Swinyard. I have to give them their accolades. They totally need it every time I talk about them. I'm sure they love me always bringing it up. Today, I am alone because, folks, we run a podcast over here, and for anyone who has ever given this a go, you will know that audio files just disappear. They have a habit of doing that. Audio files get corrupted and then they sound terrible or they don't play at all. We've had a couple of problems, surprisingly not too many actually, given how many episodes we have done. But I think last season we just couldn't find two files. This season, one of them got just really corrupted. It just didn't, like, the recording just kind of failed, so it didn't exist at all. And this one we just couldn't find. Holly has really done their due diligence. They have hunted through multiple hard drives for us over the course of the last week to try to dig up these files, and folks, they're gone. They're just gone. So, but do not fret. I am alone today, but I am not without for you. Actually, this is something that I had been thinking about doing for the Patreon for a while. Just a little peek behind the curtain here. Holly and I actually have a spreadsheet that we work from that has all of our kind of episodes that are coming out, what state they're in, all of that kind of stuff, so we can keep track. And we also have one of the sheets on that spreadsheet is a list of possible episodes to do for just eventually that we can pull from. And we have a little separate section there for fun little Patreon things that we might want to do. Holly's got a couple of ideas for kind of their own brand of things, and I had some of my own brand of things. But obviously a lot of it took time and effort and ideas, and we're kind of feeling out the Patreon still. So if you are listening to this not on Patreon, because I have decided to release this to everyone. Initially, I was going to do this just for the patrons, but then I just decided, you know what, I'm going through it to do it anyway. I'll go ahead and give this to everybody. But if this is something that you like, please let me know. If you are a patron, particularly, please let me know, because this would be for you. If you are someone who is not on the Patreon, but this might sway you to joining because this is something that you like, then please also let me know. That's really great. If you don't like this, then you can let me know, but maybe in a very, very polite way, because I am a sensitive soul. Anyway, so what we're doing today is that we're doing a little bit of like a pseudo lecture in a way. I was never really big on giving lectures back when I was at universities. It was not my favorite thing to do. I preferred teaching as seminars. It was something that I did the seminar style often, and it was something that I particularly really enjoyed, but obviously I had to do lectures every so often, and it was okay, but I preferred more of just sitting and chatting with people. So we're going to do a kind of lecture today, but I'm probably going to talk about it a bit like this, like I would if Holly was here, because, you know, because I don't like feeling very lecture-y. So we're going to be talking a little bit today about one of my favorite subjects, which is religion and popular culture. I have some coffee with me. I am sitting back in my desk chair with my microphone very close to me, because it's a very sensitive microphone, so I have to turn it down quite a bit in order for it to not pick up literally everything going on around me. So this is how I'm sitting. I want you to get comfortable. However you are listening, if you are listening at work, get as comfortable as you possibly can. But yeah, we're gonna just have a fun time chatting about a particular subject in a kind of lecture-y style, in the sense that I'm going to be telling you a lot of stuff. So strap in. I am being Professor Vivian Asimos today. So let's do it. If you are new around here, new to me talking a bit more extensively about what it is that I do as an academic, I will tell you that yes, I am an academic. When I introduce myself as the pop anthropologist, I do mean that. I have a PhD in anthropology of religion. That is what I have specialized in for a good many years. I will politely I will politely choose not to specify the number, but it is more than a decade of time that I have spent dedicating myself to the anthropology of religion. And I specialize in mythology and storytelling and popular culture. Yes, I do that a lot. That is why I am here. That is why I am on this podcast. So I wanted to talk a little bit more generally about religion and popular culture today, because I find that I think we've talked about it in circles a little bit. We've kind of referenced it here and there about what I mean, but we haven't really spent a whole long time about it, because obviously talking about religion and popular culture, there's probably a lot of things popping up in your head about what I mean by that. And you're not necessarily wrong, but you also might not necessarily be right either. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and just kind of get your mind going on all sorts of different fronts that we can delve into in the future, because this is a very large topic. This is a very large specialization. As I've said, I have spent a very long time doing all sorts of things in this. So what I did with cosplay falls under this. What I have done with the Slender Man and online storytelling falls into this, and what I am currently doing with Taylor Swift falls into this. So yes, these are all very, very different topics that we can talk about, but they all fall under this huge umbrella idea of religion and popular culture. So I'm going to start with what is probably by now a bit of an old reference. In fact, it's a video game that came out in 2013. So it has been over a decade. Oh my God, I'm old. Anyway, I used to use this when I would start lectures, when I would be teaching about religion and popular culture, particularly in regards to video games. I would always start with this story. And I recognize that it's a bit old now, and I should probably find a much more contemporary resource, but this is what you're getting. I'm sure many of my lovely listeners out there will remember BioShock Infinite, the game that came out in 2013. BioShock as a series kind of has steampunk elements. It has also a lot of commentary on religion, and BioShock Infinite was no exception. I think Comstock was the name of the kind of prophet figure in BioShock Infinite that was also kind of a baddie, because that's how it is. But let's cast our mind back to 2013 and try to remember playing BioShock Infinite for the first time. The beginning of the game follows you kind of, the very, very beginning is you getting to a lighthouse. But then once you're there, you're kind of walking through this kind of flooded atmosphere. There's candles everywhere. And there is the sound of like choir music, kind of. It's very churchy, right? I'm not gonna try to pretend that, try to get you there on your own. It is very particularly American, fundamentalist Christian feeling. There are stained glass windows. There are references to saints. There's candles everywhere. There's water on the floor. And there's this music of kind of an a cappella, hymnal kind of song playing in the background. As your character walks through this, you as a player are kind of picking up on all of these things. You come across a baptism scene. And in order to gain access to the city that you are supposed to be gaining access to, you must accept a baptism. Now, something really interesting happens with this. You have been kind of half in, half out of cutscene territory with the video game so far. So you have a couple of scenes where you are able to kind of walk through, but then there's other bits where it kind of takes control for you and shows you things. A lot of intro to video games are like this, where you kind of go back and forth. However, when you get to the point where you are asked to accept the baptism, you are offered a choice. You can either press a button to accept or you press a button to deny. If you press the button to deny, you're kind of locked out of the game. You have to start over. It's not too bad because I think you just started. In fact, I don't remember if it even forces you to get the prompt again, and it's kind of one of those circular things. I can't remember the specifics of it, but that's kind of how it is, right? There were some people, some players who played this game and felt like they couldn't get into the game because they didn't want to accept the baptism. They felt like it was an act of blasphemy. They felt like it was sacrilegious. They felt like they could not do it because it worked against their own personal religious beliefs to accept a baptism. Yes, they were aware that this is a video game. Yes, they were aware that it was just something being played. There was no kind of strange cross wires in this mindset. They asked for refunds. There is a whole Kotaku article about this, so if you want to read more about the kind of reporting of it at the time, you can read that. But we're not going to kind of go into the route of the reporting of this. We're going to kind of ask this question of why, what happened here, right? Why is it that people felt like they couldn't just press an A button and accept a baptism that they knew was fictional, that they knew was in a video game, that they knew was fake? Why were they so dead set on not pressing the A button? So now we're going to talk a little bit about religion and popular culture more generally. And there is some construction being done outside of my house, so hopefully you cannot hear it because of said microphone sensitivity, but in case you can, I'm really sorry. We're going to talk about religion and popular culture now. I think that this kind of introduction of BioShock Infinite really helped to set the scene that when we are talking about the idea of religion and popular culture, and when we are using this phrase, when we're talking about these two kind of strange dynamics, we're not just kind of talking about really fun, lighthearted things. We're talking about things that really matter to people. We're talking about some deep-rooted, deeply important feelings on a lot of different matters, and things can get really, really complicated. So when we talk about religion, right, there's obviously going to be very specific things that pop in your head. If you are from a Western background, Christianity is probably one of the primary things that you think of, right? When we think about, well, what is religion? You're probably thinking of all of those things. You're probably thinking of the scene in BioShock Infinite, to be honest. You're thinking of stained glass. You're thinking of a choir music that is a cappella, hymnal music in the background. You're thinking of baptisms, right? You're thinking of crosses. You're thinking of churches. You're thinking of pews. These are what you're thinking of. Religion, however, is obviously much bigger than that. I'm sure if I really pushed you to it, you'd realize, yes, there's many different religions in the world, and they all look quite different. But the thing is that once you start thinking about, okay, well, they all look quite different and they all feel quite different, you're going to start finding that actually it's really hard to define religion. And I talk a lot about definitions on this podcast, as I'm sure you know, that definitions are really, really difficult to talk about. And I think religion is probably one of the biggest problem areas of definitions. And I know you're probably thinking, well, it should be pretty simple, right? There's all these different things that we can think about, and maybe it's not all perfect. Maybe we can be a little general with it, but we can kind of get there, right? Well, okay. So there was a fun little task that I used to do with my first year students. And again, this was in a seminar room, so it was a bit easier to have conversation and get feedback and talk to them as kind of a group here. But I would always say, let's pretend I'm sat in this room with them, and I would say, let's pretend I'm an alien, right? I'm an alien come to Earth, and I've come to these budding scholars of religion, and I have said, okay, I have seen food, I have seen family, I have seen work, I kind of see all these different elements of life here on Earth. Can you show me religion? I want you to bring me somewhere and show me religion and what religion is. And I would ask them, what would you show me? Given this setup, what would you show me? And it was a really fun exercise for first years. It really helped them to kind of figure out different elements, and they'd kind of get into discussions about whether or not this was the better place or that was the better place. It was kind of fun. And I did this at Durham, so we were up in the north. It was a cathedral city. For people who are not familiar with England, Durham is a big cathedral town. It's pretty much all that there is. There's a university and a cathedral, and that's it. That's what's in Durham. And but the cathedral there is beautiful. It's huge, it's gorgeous, it's really important. It's a big pilgrimage site for a lot of people. So it's this big important cathedral, right? So often the cathedral would be very, very much the first thing. I think almost every year it was the very first thing mentioned. I'd bring you to the cathedral. Cool. Yeah, great. Cathedral. This has all those things that we were talking about, right? It's got the stained glass. It's got baptisms that could happen there. I don't think I've ever walked in on one, but it could, right? It could be there. You've got pews. You have a lot of people would they'd be practicing organs, like their organ playing just randomly in the middle of the day. So you could walk in and there was just an organ playing. Sometimes the choir is practicing in there. So you've got all sorts of stuff happening, right? There's all sorts of things happening. And that's what I would ask. Okay, so I walk in, what am I seeing, right? What am I seeing? And they tell me all the different things that I'd be seeing, all the things that I'd already described. They talk about the sounds, right? They talk about the organ playing. And so we'd start talking about, well, okay, so what does it mean to be religion in all of these different facets? And part of this exercise, and the important thing to keep in mind about it, is the idea that religion is a full sensory experience. And it's something that can happen in a lot of different places. It can happen in a lot of different locations. It's not just the cathedral, right? Because we're talking about, they'd bring me to the cathedral and we'd have all these experiences. And then we talk about something like, for example, the organ. And I'd say, okay, well, let's say that I went somewhere else and I heard an organ playing. Let's say I went into, a coffee shop. I don't know why a coffee shop would have an organ, but let's say I walk into a coffee shop and there's an organ and the organ is playing some kind of hymn. Is that religion? Right? And then we start getting into these more complicated discussions of once it's away from one particular location, but it's the same exact thing. Is it still religion? And obviously for a lot of people, their argument would be, yeah, of course it is. If it's done with religion in your heart, to be kind of cheesy about it, right? Then yes, of course, religion would be there. Religion is happening there. And this is because religion really is full-bodied. It's something that happens everywhere. Religion impacts so much of everything that we do, right? It impacts the way that you vote, right? It impacts your politics. It impacts the way that you eat, right? Maybe you can only eat certain foods because of your religious practice. Obviously, kosher, halal, these are really great examples of religious food observances. And there's ones that you might not know of. For example, Jainism has very strict food laws, which are that you can't eat anything that was in any way alive. So not just meat, but also vegetables, right? Particularly root vegetables. You have to kill a potato plant in order to eat the roots of the potato, right? That's what a potato is. So they wouldn't be able to eat potatoes. They wouldn't be able to eat carrots. They're not able to eat meat, obviously. And so there's all sorts of really complicated meals. They can eat fruits and berries and legumes and those kinds of things because you can harvest a strawberry and the plant continues to live, right? So these are all sorts of different rules and regulations for certain religious groups. So it impacts the way that you eat. It impacts the way that you vote. It impacts how you dress. It can impact who you talk to, right? This is also something that can happen. So religion is not something that just happens when you show up at church, right? It's something that's happening all the time. It's happening constantly, and it impacts popular culture. So there are 3 different ways that we can approach the idea of religion and popular culture and their intersections. I'm going to call these ideal types. Ideal types is something that there's a sociologist by the name of Max Weber who really popularized the idea of ideal types for discussions and study. And what they mean is that these are kind of ideas that exist as this category, but with the understanding, we know that maybe things aren't super clean, but we're going to pretend that they are in order to establish these categories, and then we can kind of play with the dirty actual example once we get there. So let's talk about these very clean ideal types, these 3 separate ones. So these kind of ways of approaching religion and popular culture is that we can look at how religion uses popular culture. We can look at how popular culture uses religion. And we can look at popular culture as religion. So let's take these one at a time, right? So the first one, religion using popular culture. Now, this is something that quite a lot of people in the study of religion and popular culture actually study. So, for example, how does a mosque deal with video games? This is a really simple one. There's been some cases where people have studied churches that were kind of upset about their presentation being in a video game because you like shot up stuff in the church and they didn't really like that. There is a Christian video game like review site. I don't remember what it's called now because it was one of those things that I grabbed as a reference like a decade ago, and I don't remember what it was called. But these things exist, right? Like if being a Christian is really, really important to you and you want to embody that in even what you are choosing to play because you don't want to choose things that are immoral to you, then having a review site that rates things on that level and kind of tells you about whether or not it was fun, but also whether or not it was something you should play is probably something really important to you. So this is something that we could look at as well. But there's also all sorts of other dynamics that we can kind of rope into this. So for example, I was studying the video game Journey at one point. That game company's Journey, the one that was on the PlayStation, you're a little pilgrim guy. Anyway, so when I was studying this, there was actually a church leader, I can't remember of what denomination, which is why I'm being kind of vague, but there was a church leader who actually contacted me and the other researcher on the project and was telling us about how they actually got their congregation together and they played the game together in the church. So this is also a really interesting dynamic of religion using popular culture, right? So it's the way that kind of a traditional, what we think of when we think of religion dynamic, how it ends up engaging with popular culture and how this kind of relationship ends up working. Our second section is kind of a flip of this, right? So we've talked about how religion uses popular culture, but we can also talk about how popular culture comments on or uses religion in their storytelling. So Far Cry, really great commentary on alt-right religion, particularly, again, probably ages ago now. I haven't seen a Far Cry game in a while, so I don't know what they're like nowadays, but at least in like 2015, 2016 time period-ish, Far Cry was making a lot of commentary on alt-right religion and evangelical Christianity. Again, BioShock Infinite was making a lot of commentary about particularly evangelical American Christianity. So that's also kind of commentary there. But we can also look at even more extreme fictitious things. So those are ones where pop culture is actually making like a commentary. They're trying to make a point. They're trying to say something about that particular religion, which is why they're using it. But you can also talk about it in a little bit more of a fully fictitious way, right? So how is religion understood and used in, I keep using video game examples. I'm sorry. That was that's what I ended up doing. But like, how is religion being depicted, right? So let's say that you are watching The Simpsons, right? And there's Ned Flanders. So how is he representing a particular religion? What's going on there? How is that being presented? We can look at games like Civilization and how religion is understood and kind of controlled and manipulated in that space. What is going on there? What are they saying about religion? How are they using religion? What's the commentary? We can also talk about just the representation more generally in, say, fantasy, right? So these are completely made up things, but how are they making up the religion? What is the kind of thing going on there? How are they engaging with it? How are they understanding it? How are they representing the dynamics that are present there? Is it something that they're representing very one-dimensionally? Are they understanding it in a lot more of a complicated endeavor? Are they saying something about religion in the way that they've represented this? So these are ways where we can kind of dig into what a popular culture is actually saying about religion when we are digging into their use of it. There is a third one, right, which is popular culture as religion. This one is a little bit more complicated, and it takes on a variety of different forms depending on what definitions you are using. Again, I I don't know if people caught that I was being incredibly shady there when I was talking about definitions of religion. I didn't come up with one, if you have noticed. I didn't say what definition of religion I use, for example. So if your definition of religion is something that you can kind of set and say, this is what I think religion is, does popular culture function in that way, right? Is there something going on here? So this is kind of complicated. And I think in more recent years, I might be able to add a fourth, which is religion as popular culture. But I'm not as tried and tested on that one. So come back to me. Come back to me on that. But I do think that that's also a really interesting dynamic of when does religion also become just a facet of the world. There was a really interesting story that I heard when I was at university. There was a professor who was talking about when he was younger. And it was census. It was a census year. And he noticed the census on the dining room table or wherever it was. And his dad had filled it out. And it had marked them all as Christian. He was kind of confused. And he went, Dad, why did you mark us as Christian? And he goes, well, because we are, right? And he goes, are we? Like, we've never been to church. I've never talked to you about Jesus or God or anything. Like, this is the first time I'm even thinking of myself in this way. And he was kind of confused. And the dad goes, well, I mean, we are British. So I think there are really interesting commentaries on how religion ends up being also this kind of identity factor, right? We understand ourselves as Christianity just because we are, say, white British people or white American people. Therefore, we must be Christian. And we're not really thinking about the fact that, are we? Like, what does it mean to say that you are this particular religion? And maybe that depends, right? That depends on a lot of different people. Maybe some people do see it just that deep. That's as much as it goes, right? That's how important it is. It's that level. But maybe some people care about it a little bit more. So we can kind of see different dynamics of this working out. So let's pop culture as religion. I'll take it back. Sorry, I jumped a little bit to religion as pop culture, but we'll talk about pop culture as religion. So if we think about religion, for example, as a very meaning-making endeavor. So this is one form of definition of religion that I have seen many, many times, that religion is the way that we kind of understand the world. We make meaning in this crazy, chaotic, insane space that we find ourselves in, right? Religion kind of makes sense of it. Religion gives us some kind of foundation. It gives us some kind of understanding. So if that is religion, but we get that from playing Legend of Zelda or from reading Jane Austen, I don't know, or from listening to Taylor Swift lyrics, is that then religion? If that's how we're kind of defining this case. So these are our three primary ideal types: religion using pop culture using religion, pop culture as religion. These are our kind of three ideal types. Now, again, these are ideal types. These don't always exist in this kind of perfect example case. We can have things that really cross-pollinate. So remember back when we were talking about religion using pop culture, and I mentioned that church playing the game Journey together at the congregation. Well, in some instances, we can talk about this as pop culture as religion. There was a reason why they picked Journey. There was a reason why they sat together and played a video game. What's happening here? Was the video game seen as kind of religious in their experience, and therefore a good setting for a congregation to gather together and play it, right? So there's kind of multiple facets happening here, and different ways that things can fit into multiple boxes all at once, or how a discussion of just one of them can kind of lead into discussions of the other, right? So the way, when we talked about pop culture commenting or using religion, the way that they represent religion, well, that can also kind of start fading into pop culture as religion when we start kind of digging into some of the meanings and the examples and how people engage with it, right? As soon as we start taking this out of a bubble, right? As soon as we stop seeing the pop culture as somehow existing as like a piece of paper, some kind of set text that we are looking at, as soon as it's something that people engage with and like feel something about, suddenly these categories are not nearly as clear as they kind of were when we were just looking at it. So let's temporarily here return to my very old example of BioShock Infinite. And just as a side note, if you haven't seen the beginning of BioShock Infinite and you're curious, you can go watch it. It's on YouTube. I highly suggest it if you haven't seen it, but this topic interests you. Go check it out. Go watch it. It's totally worth it because it's such a fascinating study. Go read that article by Kotaku because I think it's a really great entry point to this discussion. I really do. But we're returning to BioShock now. We're returning to the conversation. So what's happening here? What's happening with BioShock? We have this game, which I described in our kind of commentary of different types of popular culture intersecting with religion. I kind of threw it in the pop culture commenting on religion, right? BioShock Infinite is a commentary on evangelical Christianity in America. We're talking about these kinds of ways that religion can kind of affect the way that people see the world and the way that they can manipulate people through religion. That's what BioShock Infinite's about. I'm not saying that that's what's happening. I'm saying that's what BioShock Infinite is saying is what's happening. So just to say. So that's kind of what the game is on paper, right? That's what the game is saying on paper. But then we have people interacting with it, because as soon as people interact with it, it's suddenly not super clear. So what's happening? What's happening here? There is such an importance put on action. So if they had put the whole scene of the accepting of the baptism as a cutscene, then maybe we wouldn't have had as many. I'm not going to say we definitely wouldn't have had problems. We definitely would have to some extent, but maybe not to the extent of asking for refunds, not to the extent of saying it feels blasphemous. Maybe, I'm kind of upset by their representation of religion, right? But you wouldn't get this to quite this extent. But it's not a cutscene. It's not a cutscene. You have to press A. You have to hit X or whatever it is and triangle. I don't know what it is on all the different platforms. You have to press something. It's an active choice. It's an active choice that is happening. So at one point, the game was just pop culture commentary, but then the act of pressing a button turns it into a religious act, an actual choice. And I think this is a really important point of discussions about pop culture because, look, pop culture is fun. I'm not going to lie to you. Pop culture is fun. Being able to sit around and read stories about the Slender Man and call it research, it was fun. It was fun. I had a good time. I fooled the system. I did everything that just made everything so much more wonderful because I was able to. It's fun. And I don't think anyone is trying to say that pop culture isn't fun. I don't know. Maybe some of those religion people that are making commentaries on pop culture might say that it's not fun. But pop culture is fun. That's what it is. But... right? And I think we have spent a lot of time on this podcast already talking extensively about how just because something is fun, just because something is entertainment, doesn't mean that it doesn't hold value beyond that. It doesn't mean that it's not important to people. I have been doing research on Taylor Swift, as some of you probably know. If you don't know, go check it out. I'm doing research on Taylor Swift and mythology. But part of this was I was on a Facebook group for fans of Taylor Swift. And I was just kind of scrolling through these posts. And obviously some of them are fun memes. Some of them are just silly conversation. But some of them have some really deep attachment to each other in the fandom, to Taylor Swift as a general idea to her music as facets of connectivity. So there was somebody, I'm going to be kind of vague because I'm just reading it online. So there's like no permissions granted here. But I saw somebody that was, wrote this whole long thing about a relationship that they felt like they weren't sure whether or not to leave, and needing help to kind of see things and make a decision. I didn't read the whole thing, but I saw people's responses to it. And some of them were just responding in general. Hey man, don't stay with this guy. He sounds terrible, right? And then there were other people that were quoting lyrics from Taylor Swift as the guidance. And that's really fascinating, right? Now we've got kind of pop culture being guiding lights. This is the meaning making that we were talking about. But obviously, like, I don't think you necessarily have to be able to put Swiftie on a census to say that that's what you are in order for it to be kind of connected to this pop culture as religion. You don't have to put Hylian on a census record in order for the Triforce, in order to be important to you and to think about it in your day-to-day life. You don't have to put Swiftie on there in order to look at those lyrics and see them as guiding points for you. But this is also another kind of weird Christian focus thing that sometimes happens, which is that you don't have to be just one religion. Like, you don't have to. Like, people are multiple religions a lot. And maybe you find meaning in a variety of different locations. Because, like, let's be honest, now more than ever, I think we can really look at the world and see that it is, it takes a lot of effort to remain sane in this world. It really does. It's scary. It is chaotic. It is intimidating. And it's also really beautiful. And sometimes navigating between all of those different things, all of those different feelings can be a lot. And having the expectation that just one thing can answer all of that complication, all of that nuance, all of that ridiculous back and forth that happens, I don't know if necessarily that is for everybody. And sometimes you've got to kind of take a little bit from Star Wars, take a little bit from BioShock, take a little bit from Taylor Swift, maybe. I don't know. I'd love to see the interest. I'd love to see the person. I'd love to meet the person who had that intersection in their life. But, that's what I'm trying to say, though, is that pop culture can serve this kind of function. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about pop culture and religion, is we're talking about all of these different facets. We're talking about all of the complicated nuances within it and how it all kind of comes to be. So for me, when I come to talk about fandom on a podcast like this, one of the things that I'm really interested in about fandom are those connections. I'm interested in the way that people have built community. I'm interested in the meaning making that's going on. I'm interested in the foundations of stories that have given people reason to get up in the morning, have given people reason to leave toxic, terrible, abusive, sometimes relationships. These are sometimes they've given people, it's given people the ability to quit drugs or alcohol and to get sober. And these are also really beautiful things. And I think sometimes we can get caught up in a lot of the really terrible things that are going on. But there's also some really nice things too. And maybe we should try to keep that in mind. I have talked for way too long at you guys. If you enjoyed this little semi-lecture, I can do so much more. Don't tempt me with a good time. You can let me know that you really enjoyed it. This post will be live for anybody on Patreon. So if you are not a patron, you can still go over there and comment. So give me your thoughts. You can also email them to fanofThatpodcast@gmail.com. I'm pretty sure that's our email. It'll be in the description if that's not, but I believe it is fanofThatpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to send me your thoughts there, if that's something that you would prefer. If this is something that you enjoyed, please let me know. If it is not something that you enjoyed, you can let me know very kindly. Please be kind about it. But yeah, I enjoyed this, and if this is something that people seem to really like, I'll probably be doing a lot more of it over on the Patreon. So if you are interested in hearing everything that the Patreon has to offer, you can go over to patreon.com/fanofThatPod and you can check out everything there. We are going to be doing bonus episodes all through the off season. So the normal feed will not have episodes starting from about, I think, beginning of October, end of October, mid-October, mid to late October. Mid to late October, there will be no more episodes on the main feed, but they will be picking up right where they left off over on the Patreon. So if you do not want to miss any of your lovely friends over here at Fan of That Pod, you can go over there in order to check out all of those. And in the meantime, there's all of last season's bonus episodes that you can go check out. I greatly appreciate it. Anyway, thanks for humoring me, and I will see you next time. Bye!
Thanks for listening. Remember to like, review and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast, and do give it a share. Tell your friends, family and fellow fans and get the word out. You can follow us on social media, links in the show notes, as are some links to further reading. Who doesn't like a reading list? We are nerds after all. Music for this episode was Nowhere Land by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons Attribute 3.0. This episode was produced by Vivian, Asimos and Holly Swinyard.